Welcome in to NFL Daily. I am Will Scott. We got some news that Trey Lance could be on the move. So on today's show, we're going to be breaking down the top 5 trade destinations for the San Francisco 49ers quarterback. There is a report from Ian Rappaport that the 49ers have gotten several trade calls for the former number 3 overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft. He's kind of unproven. Just 8 career games played, 4 starts. Of course, he was going to be the Niners starter this entire past season, but he did have the season-ending ankle injury in Week 2. We did not see him after that. He missed most of the 2022 season, of course, after that season-ending ankle injury. There's no surprise to me that several teams have interest, and here's why. There are several teams that probably need a quarterback or maybe feel like their current quarterback is not the guy, right? And they might be not sold on Anthony Richardson or Will Levis or some other quarterbacks in the NFL draft. Let's say a team like the Titans or the Commanders that don't have that high of a pick and they don't really feel like their guy at quarterback is going to fall to them. Maybe trading for Trey Lance might make some sense for a team like that. That's why I'm not surprised that we're seeing several teams have interest here, because at least for me, I'm not really sold on any quarterback outside of Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud in this class. Taking a look at Trey Lance's stats through 4 starts in his career. 2 starts came in 2021, and then the first 2 games this past season before the season-ending ankle injury. 54.9% completion percentage, nearly 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, 3 picks, 235 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. And I'll say this, I wouldn't say he passed the eye test in these 4 starts. There were certainly some growing pains. And when San Francisco took him, keep in mind he was an FCS product from North Dakota State. You certainly knew he was going to be a project. But the potential is there. Where will Trey Lance get traded? I think he is going to get traded, but where do you think he's going to get traded? Let me know down in the comment section. It is the pinned comment on today's video. So when ad break comes, go down, chime in. Let me know, where is Trey Lance going to get traded? Before I get into my top 5 destinations, I wanted to shout out some honorable mentions, some teams that probably aren't going to be in serious contention to land him, but might at least inquire. The Atlanta Falcons might be a team to watch here. I think they need a quarterback. They apparently don't, because they have committed to Desmond Ridder. And look, I'm not saying that Desmond Ridder's not going to be a good quarterback. I think he has a lot of potential. I really liked him at Cincinnati. But we just talked about a second ago, Trey Lance is unproven. You can certainly say the same about Desmond Ridder. Maybe you trade for Lance, you bring in some competition there for Desmond Ridder. It is worth noting, though, the Falcons did sign Taylor Heineke to be the backup quarterback, so that QB room would be a little bit crowded. Number 2 honorable mention is the Baltimore Ravens. Now, you know, what's going to happen with Lamar Jackson? Lamar Jackson requested a trade. He might not be back. If that's the case, it could be possible, if Lamar does not come back to Baltimore, that they trade for Trey Lance. I don't hate the fit, him going and playing under John Harbaugh over there in Baltimore, and then with new offensive coordinator Todd Monken. I don't like the fit at all. Todd Monken, excuse me. Washington Commanders, number 3 here on my honorable mentions list. I understand they've committed to Sam Howell. They feel like Howell's the guy, but Howell only has 1 career start. Now, did he look good in that regular season finale against Dallas? Yeah, but if I'm Ron Rivera and I'm that front office and my job is on the line and I got a new owner coming, I'm a little bit nervous with Sam Howell. I'd feel a little bit better with Trey Lance as my quarterback. We're going to have you covered if a Trey Lance trade goes down, so subscribe for nonstop coverage of the latest NFL news and rumors. And we have the NFL draft coming up next week. We're going to have the best NFL draft coverage for you, not just on YouTube, but in general. You know how you're watching like down to the 4th, 5th, 6th rounds, ESPN's in commercial break, you miss your favorite team's pick. No commercial breaks here at Chat Sports, so be sure to subscribe and join us for NFL draft coverage next month. Let's get in to my top 5 Trey Lance trade destinations. And we begin with maybe a dark horse here. The Minnesota Vikings coming in at number 5. And yeah, they have Kirk Cousins, but I think it's possible that a Kirk Cousins for Trey Lance swap could happen. You heard Mike Florio kind of talk about at the NFL Combine the possibility of this happening because you have the Kyle Shanahan and Kirk Cousins connection. They worked together when Kirk Cousins was in Washington. Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator. He's always been a huge fan of Kirk Cousins, and the Vikings would create $10 million in cap space if they traded him after June 1st. Kirk Cousins is a free agent after this next season. Again, Florio mentioned the 49ers to be in the conversation if a Kirk Cousins trade does go down. And look, I think Kirk Cousins is good. Kind of a polarizing figure, though, amongst Vikings fans because he really just has not won anything in Minnesota, has not gotten the job done in the big games, and has not really gotten them that far in the postseason. So when you look at a guy like Trey Lance, who has a lot of potential, is much younger than Kirk Cousins, it might make some sense. Not to mention, Trey Lance grew up in Minnesota. He grew up a big Vikings fan. It would be a homecoming for Trey Lance. So maybe a win-win for both Cousins and Lance, because Cousins, if he goes to San Francisco, would probably be on the NFC favorite, I think at least, the NFC favorite 49ers if he goes there. And then Trey Lance would go back home to Minnesota, and I think a fresh start would bode really well for Trey Lance. You get to work with a young coach, too, and Kevin O'Connell, who did a fantastic job in his first season in Minnesota. So Patrick Seatman, the host of our Minnesota Vikings channel here at Chat Sports, drew up this trade idea. Vikings received Trey Lance and 2 third-round picks this year. The 49ers receive Kirk Cousins. Interesting trade. I don't know if the 49ers do this trade. I think the Vikings might, but let me know down in the comment section who wins this trade. Type MIN for the Minnesota Vikings or type SF for the Niners down in the comment section. Who wins this trade? And you might say, oh, the Niners are giving up too much there. Well, but Kirk Cousins is pretty good, borderline top 10 quarterback. And if you trade for him and you have a quarterback room that consists of Brock Purdy and Kirk Cousins, let's say they're a little bit uncertain about Purdy's health beginning of this season. They want to have a comfortability level in terms of who's going to be their quarterback. Kirk Cousins might make some sense. And, of course, as we mentioned, Kyle Shanahan has always been a big fan. Going out to number 4, it is the Las Vegas Raiders, and they have the number 7 overall pick. It's very possible, maybe even likely, that they are going to draft a quarterback, but if they opt maybe to go a different route, trade for Trey Lance, they could recreate the Jimmy G Trey Lance quarterback room that we saw in San Francisco last season. How wild would that be? I don't know how realistic it is. I think the 3 teams we're going to talk about here in a second might be a little bit more realistic. But Las Vegas, I would imagine, has at least inquired about Trey Lance. Again, multiple teams have reached out to San Francisco about a possible trade. The Raiders probably going to add to that quarterback room via trade, maybe via the draft. Number 3 on my list is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, they're 2 quarterbacks right now, Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. They do not have a third quarterback on this roster. So right now it's the plan for those 2 to compete for the starting job in camp. And do they feel comfortable with that? Maybe. But if you were to add a third guy to the mix here, and that third guy is the former number 3 overall pick, I just think that's a much better situation for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I'm a Baker Mayfield believer. I actually think he's going to do a good job in Tampa Bay. But if they're not completely sold, then maybe a Trey Lance trade makes some sense for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They could certainly look to add a quarterback. I think the top 2 contenders, though, kind of separate themselves from the rest of the bunch. And number 2 is the Tennessee Titans. There's some connections here between the Titans and Trey Lance, beginning with Ran Carthon, the former 49ers executive for 5 years, so was in that front office drafting Trey Lance. He is now the Tennessee Titans general manager. A lot of speculation, obviously, surrounding Ryan Tannehill's future in Tennessee. I don't think Tannehill's the guy there going forward. And then maybe Malik Willis could be shipped to San Francisco in a potential deal to be one of the backups behind Brock Purdy. Tennessee kind of gave Willis a shot this year. Didn't like what they saw from him. opted to start Josh Dobbs in their final 2 games with the playoffs on the line. So I don't really think they feel great about the former third-round pick Malik Willis over there in Tennessee. And that's why I think the Titans should go all in here. I think this trade makes a lot of sense for Tennessee. You got to know Rand Carthen thinks highly of Trey Lance. He drafted Trey Lance, number 3 overall, less than 2 years ago. Tennessee, this makes a lot of sense for the Titans to inquire here about Trey Lance. As we're breaking down the top 5 trade destinations here for Trey Lance, and number 1 on my list is the Houston Texans. Could Lance be H-Town bound? Because there's been a lot of rumors that Houston may not take a quarterback at number 2, or they might trade down. Head coach DeMeco Ryans obviously was in San Francisco as the defensive coordinator for the last 2 years, and then the guy he hired to be his OC, Bobby Slowick, was the passing game coordinator working directly with Trey Lance. So Trey Lance has some connections with that Houston Texans coaching staff. I do believe that the Texans are the top trade destination for Trey Lance, and they will make this trade to bring Trey Lance to the Houston Texans. I think it makes some sense if the Texans are not sold on any quarterback outside of Bryce Young, because right now the Texans have the number 2 overall pick. It looks like Bryce Young is going number 1 overall to Carolina. They're not sold on Stroud. They're not sold on any quarterbacks in this class outside of Young. They've talked about trading back. They've talked about maybe just drafting Will Anderson at 2 or Tyree Wilson. So I don't know what the Texans are going to do. But if it's true that they're not sold on any other quarterback outside of Young, and they know they're not going to get Young, then maybe they'll seriously look in to trading for Trey Lance. And I do believe the number 33 overall pick would be enough to land the former number 3 overall pick. Now, what should the Texans do? Should they draft a quarterback? I still lean toward drafting C.J. Stroud. Or should they trade for Trey Lance? Type D for draft a quarterback, or type T for trade for Trey Lance. Down in the comment section, go down and chime in. What should Houston do here in in the next week? So breaking down again the top 5 Trey Lance trade destinations. At number 5, the Minnesota Vikings. At number 4, the Las Vegas Raiders. Number 3, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then 2 AFC South rivals, I think, are going to separate themselves from the rest. Number 2, the Tennessee Titans. Rand Carthen, former 49ers executive. He is the GM in Tennessee. He drafted Trey Lance. And then former 49ers defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans, the new head coach in Houston. Bobby Slowick, the OC, worked with Trey Lance as well. I believe the Houston Texans are the number 1 trade destination for Trey Lance.